Welcome everybody to today's Ibua conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. Today I am joined by Kunihira Rachel Masinde, Chairperson, Board of Lantern Meat Foundation, and Liz Mbabazi, Kionesha Art Fund Officer. My name is Karungi Kwatampora, and I'll be your host today. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Charity.
I'm really excited to have you join us for today's conversation. As we shared before, today we are focusing on culture and creative arts, and how that sector is doing in Uganda, what your respective organizations are doing regarding that as part of that sector, and any other things as we go along in conversation that will arise. Thank you so much once again for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
So to get us started, I would like to ask each of you to speak about yourselves briefly, the organizations that you are leading, and their role in the cultural and creative arts sector in Uganda, the region, and the continent. Rachel?
Thank you, Charity, for having me. Yes, I am currently, like I keep saying, I hold many offices where it comes to LMF, but I'm the current chairperson for the board. And personally, I'm an engineer, I'm a writer, I'm a poet. So I do many things with my time, but I am passionate about writing, passionate about the arts, passionate about the LMF. And what we are doing in Uganda and on the continent. And I think that's it for now. We're going to
That's it.
Okay.
That's it. We can, have these, and then we'll come back to the organizational part.
Thank you, Charity. My name is Elizabeth Mbabazi, and I support a program that's called the Kuonyesha Art Fund. Kuonyesha is housed under Sieve Source Africa and the Sieve Fund. And we seek to set a footprint of the arts in Africa and what the arts can do to transform community and to express the full extent of the vibrance of civil society and full participation in the different communities that the artists live and move. I'm personally an artist as well, both in practice and training. And I'm very passionate about all things art because I believe in the power of the arts to transform communities. So it's really a pleasure being here.
Yeah, you mentioned that you're an artist both in practice and in training. And that is, for someone who's known you for a while, seeing you transition from practice and training into management, policy, and all has been interesting. What is that journey? What has that journey been like for you?
Well, on a personal space, because I've, throughout my education background, it's been the arts. So I studied industrial and fine art at Makerere, and then carried that into a master's in arts and fine art, and also carried that into a master's in business administration, still focusing on the component of what the arts hold as a business sector. So that was quite exciting, and transitioning from a space of practice, of training into practice, or practice into training.
Yes.
It helps to have a foundation of the practice, because then you're able to operate from an informed perspective and also support from an informed perspective, because supporting the arts it's a very niche community. It takes understanding of what the arts are like and the different challenges that an artist goes through in practice to be able to appreciate what it takes to create art and to live and move as an artist. And then what that space they hold within the community, it helps to understand that background. So for me to transition in that space was more really organic. It was not far from where my heart was.
Yeah. It's not removed from what.
No.
Yes. Rachel, what about you? Because I know that you're an engineer by training, but you've also been involved with the performing arts, especially poetry, the Lantern Meat Poetry Circle. So what about, how do those two aspects of your life come together?
I think for me, it's only later now that I've realized that they've always been together. I always argue that engineering is is as much an art as it is a science. And even in the practice of it, you find that there are lots of art skills and more artistic viewpoints that are very necessary when you practice as an engineer. It helps you open your mind more. So for me, from a young age, I loved performing. It's just what I did. And so I discovered a love for engineering later on because I desired to do something that I felt would be impactful for the community. And engineering seemed a very good way to do that. But I never stopped performing. And so as I got older, I met other people doing other things who loved poetry. Poetry was something that was personal, something that I could go to. I loved reading it, but poetry had it was vibrant, it was just wonderful to listen, even just for myself. And so we loved poetry and came together doing that. And once we did that, we drew a community to ourselves. And that community had people like us, people who had done the arts as training, people like us who hadn't, but loved both writing and and poetry as well. And so we really created a large community. And once the community was created, it needed something to do because at the time, this was 2007, there was hardly anybody performing poetry in Kampala, leave alone Uganda. Like nobody was performing poetry that we knew at least. And so we began, and once we began, just the ball just really evolved. And as you asked Liz, once you begin to practice and you see what else can be done and you begin to see the challenges, it's an easy transition now into policy, into management, into group organization, into the business side of it, because how does this now sustain itself?
Yes.
You stop looking at, we are doing something next month, but we want to be here in 10 years. And if you want to be somewhere in 10 years, you have to have a structure, you have to have a plan, you have to have a vision, you have to, and that, like, it really just evolved from there. And so out of the Lantern Meet of Poets grew the Lantern Meet Foundation. Because we decided that we basically wanted to carve a space for ourselves. Not just to be patronized, but to actually make an impact in the space, to be remembered for more than just a show.
Yes.
And so that's when we went into the Lantern Meet Foundation and began looking at creating IBOA. That's where IBOA was born, IBOA Publishing. We still have the Poetry Circle, and through that we want the longevity of the work that we have. We always say we had big egos, but that's really the ambition of it, to be able to say we were in our early 20s, mid-20s, many of us, and just said we want to be 60 and look at a body of work. And to create that, we had to have the Lantern Meet Foundation, because there was nothing for us.
You had to create a structure to hold that. Okay. So you spoke just briefly about the Lantern Meet Foundation, given just a snippet. Could you just speak more to the aspirations for, when you say have a body of work, what does that mean? What do you do as the Lantern Meet Foundation?
Okay, so one of the first challenges we met after we had multiple shows, poetry shows at the National Theatre, was one, the poetry kind of just disappeared. And so we said, okay, let's publish. We could not find a publisher willing to put their name on our work in Uganda. Not one single, and we were a diverse group. Surely we had some parental connections that we could use. But all the doors we knocked on said no. They were not going to publish us. And we had box files, like collections of poetry. We were very many. And we were writing every 2 weeks, So every circle had at least 15 poems.
Yes.
And that was just one poem per person. Some
Yes.
circles, we were writing 3, 4, 5 poems, you know. And so we really had a lot of work, but not one single publisher said yes. So it was the first challenge we met. And so we continued with performing, but it wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough. And it's easy for performances to be shut down because as we were growing, we were also becoming more politically aware, more socially aware. So our writing was also transforming.
Changing, yes.
It's very easy to shut down a performance.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not so easy to kill a book, yeah? But also a book can get into many more hands than one night or 3 nights. So we said, fine, let's do it ourselves. Let's figure out a way to do it ourselves. And out of that was birthed Ibua Publishing. So Ibua began first as a journal. We said, let's create a journal. But then we asked ourselves, what more can we do? There were writers, but then when the writing came out, it wasn't good enough. We were submitting our poetry to competitions, our short stories to competitions, and being rejected. They were not good enough. So which means that our writing skill, we had passion, but our skill, our training
Needed to grow, yes.
Yes, needed to grow. Again, outside of the university, there weren't many spaces for us to actually grow that craft. There were not many. So, though that's the next thing we decided to do. And so when we began Ibua Publishing, this is what we said. We are going to publish each other. We're going to publish ourselves. Like, if you're a Ugandan, an emerging writer, we're going to publish. We're going to publish you in print. We're going to publish you online.
Yes.
Like, we're going to find a way to publish you. We wanted to extend it also to Africa. Because these are problems that we see not just for ourselves, it's across the continent. Like when you look at the writers, if you ask for an African writer, they're South Africa or they're Nigeria.
Yes.
And they're based in Europe or the US. Not one of them is most of them are not living on the continent.
True.
Said, no, we're going to publish. 2, we're going to train. We're going to teach each other how to write so that we can actually compete on a global market.
Yeah.
Let it not be said that, again, we don't want to be patronized. We don't want people just saying, oh, it's African, we'll take it. No, we want to say we'll take it because it's good.
It's competitive.
Yes, it's good. And so that's the things that we went into. So the labs were created in Ibua Publishing. And when we said with the labs, the enthusiasm, the idea that we could actually improve our craft.
The quality of the writing.
When we began doing that, we found that there were not many editors available with the time, and we said, okay, now we have to train editors. So it's really been a process of what are the challenges, how can we fix them? And so that's really what we've been about with Ibua Publishing. We want to tell African stories. So we focus primarily in this time on Ibua Publishing. Okay. We refer to LMF as a mothership, but the first baby is Ibua Publishing. And in Ibua Publishing, we want to give an opportunity for the whole of Africa to read African stories. To read African stories told by Africans, people living on the continent. Okay, yes, you might have left the continent, but also give people the opportunity not to leave the continent. You don't have to leave the continent for you to be
able to grow your craft.
Yes, to grow your craft
and to get published
and be published and be read. Yeah, and be read.
The question of access. The question of access for the African creative.
Yes.
That to be able to access these opportunities that bring you into editorial support, publishing or just growing your craft, that you have to compromise you have to give up home.
Yeah.
The thing, the thing that centers you. You have to give that up, and I hear that the question of access. So Ibua Publishing is the first project under the Lantern Mead Foundation. But the Lantern, as you just taking from what you're saying, the Lantern Mead Foundation is, your history has been about adapting to the situation around you, like
both
creatives.
There's adapting to the situation, but also we've always tried to chart a way forward.
To chart a new way.
A new way forward. Because there is what we've seen and what is available.
Yes.
But we've never said, okay, we're going to take this. We've said, no, we're going to do something about it. Even when people said, you can't do it, you're going to fail. Our first poetry performance, we didn't even charge. I think the first maybe 8 performances, we didn't charge anything. We just said, we want people to come and hear us.
Yeah, I do remember.
It took us several executive meetings to actually charge for the past performance. That's how important it was that we were heard. Yeah. But as we've grown, like, the needs of the people grow. So we need to chart, indeed, to make a way. So that's also the way we look at things. Like, there's what is here, what is available, and how can we use what's available, but what can we create? What can we create as LMF in the space? And so we've started with the Ibua Publishing because there's the part of telling African stories. Eventually, we will definitely go into education. Because if we are looking at, in a way, remolding our psyche, remolding our society, we have to educate the small ones. So eventually, we shall go into education. Education in the arts. How do we make it that people cannot tell us that the arts are not important? Because as an engineer, I know how important it is. Their processes or their meetings. I'm in business with my husband. We own a construction company. But there are things he says, no, Rachel will do them. Because of my arts background. And that's why I can do them just that little better than he does. Because my brain has been trained to look at things differently than his, which is focused completely on the science. Everything is a bit logical, kind of thing. So that adds a different element to it. And so I know very clearly that the arts are important. I have experienced it. I am living it. And so we eventually want to be able to create programs that can be fixed in schools. Yeah. And some of us are already trying to chart that way forward. We're not doing it, but we're working on it.
You're thinking through the processes and all.
The other part of it is the poverty of an artist's life, which is why people avoid the arts. True. It's easier to make money in sciences because that's where you get paid, right? True. If you're a programmer, you're going to get paid really good money. You're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Like, the only arts thing people will say is a lawyer, right? But anything else. So how do we re-engineer the way artists are paid, the way writers are paid? And so that's why at Ibua we are very, very serious about, one, paying our contributors. Yeah. Right now it might not be a lot, but we make sure that each one of them at least gets something. Mm-hmm. So you did this work, you should be paid for it. True. We're encouraging people. It is difficult, yes, and everyone says no one reads, so no one will subscribe to your work, no one will buy books, no one, yes, those are the difficulties and the challenges that we are meeting in this model, but that's today. Yeah. When we started, no one was having poetry performances. Right now, you will not get a poet to perform for you free. I mean, the first thing they'll ask you is what you're paying me. True. But that would not have been possible if we hadn't started.
10 years, yes. 10 years.
We had to start. We had to get people
yes,
to understand that poetry is actually enjoyable, poetry is valuable, that there is time and energy and creative work that goes into this.
So what I hear is the LMF has been a forerunner in this space.
Yes.
And
yes,
continues
for
to
many
be.
years, and continues to be. We get hounded a bit about not being as loud because we're no longer doing regular performances.
Yes.
But we reached a place, I think it was 2012. We got to a place and we said, again, we reminded ourselves of what we actually wanted to do. We said, it's great. We are filling the National Theatre and it's wonderful. There's a lot of hype, there's a lot of excitement, but people are fickle. Yeah. The next thing is going to come in and they're going to forget. And we were beginning to write for the hype, for the performance. Mm. And the writing was also beginning to lose its flavor, We said, no. Let's take a step back. We stopped. We were criticized for that decision. I mean, internally, it nearly tore us apart. Just saying, no, we should be out there, we should. And I said, no. Yeah. Let's take a step back and reassess. Yeah. And when we reassessed, we began Ibua publishing. Again, there's the constant hounding. Other people are doing a lot more. You see, you should be out there as a brand, you should be doing all these things. Like, yeah, they're great, but we are building. When you're digging, like the higher you want to go, the farther down you need to dig. Yeah, mm-hmm. I'm not going to dig a foundation this small and I'm putting 10 stories. Yeah. The guy who's putting 10 stories is going to spend 3-4 months digging into the ground. Yeah. He's like, all that money you're sinking into the ground, like, where I'm going. Where I'm going. So for me, that's what I really try to remind the team. Like, kind of just put out the noise and remember that what we're building for is longevity. Is the longevity. And so some things are not going to be... people ask who's the LMF, who is Lantern Mate of Poets, and it kind of stings. You're like, hey... But we're doing the work.
Building.
Yes.
You're building. Thank you.